You've been told globalization is permanent, that trade always grows, that the world gets smaller, faster, cheaper, forever, that you've been lied to. Globalization isn't collapsing overnight. There's no dramatic headline moment. It's dying slowly through friction. Sanctions pile up. Supply chains split in two. Countries scramble to build factories they already have somewhere else. And every product you buy quietly gets more expensive. This is the story of how trade became a weapon, how efficiency became a threat, and how the world is fracturing into rival economic fortresses, not because anyone wanted it, but because no one could stop it. Here's what nobody says out loud. Trade wars don't end. They just get renamed. National security, industrial policy, reshoring. These aren't solutions, they're taxes, and you're paying them. So here's the roadmap. 7 reasons globalization is bleeding out: the security tax, the sanctions era, the subsidy arms race, supply chain duplication, choke point fragility, the end of cheap labor, and money itself fragmenting into blocks. Each one makes the world a little more expensive, a little more rigid, a little less connected. But here's the real question. What happens when trade stops being about profit and becomes purely about power? Let's find out. Here's the myth. Companies choose the cheapest supplier. Markets optimize. End of story. Here's the reality. The cheapest supplier is now a liability. For decades, globalization ran on a simple rule: buy from whoever can make it cheaper. Semiconductors from Taiwan, batteries from China, rare earths from also China. Nobody cared where it came from. They cared what it cost. Then something shifted. Suddenly, efficiency started sounding like dependence, and dependence started sounding like vulnerability. Governments looked at their supply chains and realized, we don't actually make anything critical anymore. Chips, foreign. Batteries, foreign. Antibiotics, foreign. Even the materials to build defense systems, foreign. Turns out, outsourcing everything works great until you need it during a crisis. So now we have the security tax. It's not an official tax. You won't see it on a receipt, but it's there, baked into every product that gets reshored or friendshored or built domestically at twice the cost because it's too risky to buy it from the most efficient producer. Here's the kicker. It's not just defense. It's food. It's energy. It's medicine. Anything that might matter in a crisis is now being redesigned for security first, cost second. And this is where it gets ugly. Because once you start defining supply chains by who you trust instead of who's cheapest, you've fundamentally broken the logic of globalization. You're not optimizing anymore. You're fortifying. The European Union wants semiconductor independence. The U.S. wants battery independence. India wants rare earth independence. Everyone wants to make everything, even the stuff they're terrible at making. It's like trying to grow bananas in Alaska because you don't trust tropical countries anymore. But here's what nobody tells you. The security tax isn't temporary. It doesn't go away when tensions ease. Because once a politician stands up and says, we will never depend on insert rival country again, they can't walk it back. It becomes policy. It becomes subsidy. It becomes permanent cost. So the price floor rises, and it never comes back down, which raises an uncomfortable question. If trade is now a security issue, who exactly are we securing it from? Here's the old playbook. If you don't like a country, you go to war. Bombs, tanks, occupation. Here's the new playbook. You just stop trading with them. Welcome to the sanctions era, where economic exclusion is the weapon of choice. And the body count is measured in GDP points, not casualties. It started small. A few rogue states. North Korea, Iran, Cuba. Countries the world could afford to ignore. But then it scaled. Russia invades Ukraine, and suddenly, Europe cuts off gas imports worth hundreds of billions. The U.S. freezes central bank reserves. SWIFT access gets revoked. An entire G20 economy gets economically quarantined. And here's the part nobody says out loud. It worked. Sort of. Russia's economy contracted. Inflation spiked. But here's the kicker. So did everyone else's. Energy prices in Europe tripled. Supply chains froze. Fertilizer shortages hit Africa. Wheat prices spiked globally. Sanctions are expensive, not just for the target, for everyone. But the precedent is set. If you can sanction Russia, you can sanction anyone. And suddenly, every government on Earth is looking at their trade relationships and asking, what if we're next? China watches the West freeze Russian reserves and thinks, what stops them from doing that to us? So they start buying gold, stockpiling commodities, building payment systems that bypass the dollar. India, Brazil, Turkey, they all start asking the same question. And the answer is the same: diversify. Don't rely on one currency. Don't rely on one market. Don't rely on one payment rail. This is where it gets messy, because sanctions don't just punish the target. They fracture the entire system. Every sanction is a reminder that trade isn't neutral, that access can be revoked, that your counterparty might one day become your enemy. And once that fear sets in, behavior changes. Permanently, countries start hoarding critical goods. They duplicate supply chains. They build redundant infrastructure. They stop trusting efficiency, because efficiency requires trust. And let that sink in. The more sanctions we use, the less globalized the world becomes. Every exclusion is a signal. Every freeze is a warning. And every country is quietly preparing for the day they might be the one locked out. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Sanctions are effective, but they're also contagious. And the cost of using them is a world that trades less, trusts less, and cooperates less. Which raises the next question. If everyone is protecting themselves from everyone else, who's actually safe? Here's what you were taught. Free markets work. Competition drives innovation. Government stays out of the way. Here's what's actually happening. Governments are buying their industrial base back. With your money. Welcome to the subsidy arms race, where every country is spending billions to build factories, grow industries, and prop up companies that should fail under normal market conditions, but can't be allowed to fail because they're strategic. The U.S. passes the CHIPS Act, $52 billion in subsidies to rebuild semiconductor manufacturing. Europe responds with the European CHIPS Act, another $43 billion. China's already spent hundreds of billions on its Made in China 2025 plan. South Korea, Japan, India, everyone's throwing cash at the same industries. It's like a poker game where everyone keeps raising and nobody folds. Here's the kicker. These aren't loans. They're gifts. Taxpayer money handed to corporations to build factories that might be profitable in 10 years. Or might not. Doesn't matter. Because this isn't about profit anymore. It's about presence. You want chips made domestically? Fine. But you're going to pay double what Taiwan charges. You want batteries made locally? Great. They'll cost 40% more than the Chinese version. You want steel, solar panels, rare earths produced at home? Sure. Just be ready for the price tag. And here's where it gets absurd. These subsidies don't stay contained. They spread. Because once one country subsidizes an industry, every other country has to match it or lose that industry entirely. It's a race to the bottom. Except the bottom is measured in how much public money you're willing to burn to keep factories on your soil. Capitalism, but with training wheels. Paid for by taxpayers. Now, let's be real for a second. If you've made it this far and you're not subscribed, what are you doing? Hit that button. Because videos like this don't make themselves. And I'd love to keep making them. Anyway, back to the subsidies. The problem isn't just the money. It's the incentives. When governments start picking winners, companies stop competing on efficiency. They start competing on lobbying. Who can get the biggest subsidy? Who can convince politicians their factory is critical? And once that starts, it never stops. Because no politician wants to be the one who lost an industry to a rival country. So the subsidies keep flowing. The costs keep rising. And the market, the thing that's supposed to allocate resources efficiently, gets overridden by politics. Let that sink in. We're not in a free market anymore. We're in a managed market, where trade flows are decided by bureaucrats and subsidies, not supply and demand. And the wildest part? It's bipartisan. Left, right, center, everyone agrees. Industrial policy is back. The government is the factory builder now. Which raises an obvious question. If every country is subsidizing the same industries, who's actually winning this race? Here's the efficiency dream. One factory, one supply chain, one optimized system that feeds the entire world. Here's the new reality. 2 factories, 2 supply chains, 2 of everything, because nobody trusts the original one anymore. This is supply chain duplication. And it's expensive. For decades, globalization ran on specialization. China made electronics. Germany made cars. Taiwan made chips. Everyone did what they were best at, and trade moved it around. It was elegant. It was efficient. It's dead. Now, every major company is being told the same thing by their government. We need a backup. Not because the original supply chain is bad, but because it's foreign. and foreign means vulnerable. So Apple builds iPhone factories in India, even though China already does it cheaper and faster. Tesla builds battery plants in the US and Germany, even though the same batteries are already being made in China at half the cost. Pharmaceutical companies duplicate drug production across multiple continents, even though one facility could supply everyone. It's the same factory, built twice, in two different countries, for twice the cost. And here's the part that nobody talks about. Duplication isn't just about building the factory. It's about duplicating the entire ecosystem. The suppliers, the logistics, the trained workforce, the quality standards. You can't just copy-paste a factory and expect it to work. You have to rebuild the whole network around it. And every step costs money. Your money. Here's where it gets messy. Because once you start duplicating supply chains for security, you can't stop. It's not just chips. It's batteries. It's rare earths. It's pharmaceuticals. It's food. It's everything that might get disrupted in a crisis. And the definition of crisis keeps expanding. A pandemic, a war, a trade dispute, a political disagreement. Suddenly, any source of uncertainty justifies duplication. Let that sink in. We're building redundancy into the global economy, not because it makes economic sense, but because it makes political sense. And redundancy is expensive. Always. Think about it like this. Imagine you own a car. It works fine, but your neighbor tells you, what if that car breaks down? You should buy a second car, just in case. So you buy a second car. Same model, same function. It just sits in your driveway as insurance. That's what supply chain duplication is. Except instead of cars, it's semiconductors, batteries, and medicines. And instead of one person paying for it, it's everyone. Congratulations. You now own two of everything. And both are more expensive than the one you used to have. But here's the kicker. Even with duplication, you're not actually safer. Because the second supply chain is fragile too. It's newer, less tested, more expensive to maintain. And if a real crisis hits, there's no guarantee it works any better than the original. You've just paid double for the illusion of security. Which raises the uncomfortable question. If we're duplicating everything, are we actually building resilience? Or are we just building waste? Here's what globalization promised. Frictionless trade. Goods moving seamlessly across oceans. A world connected by container ships. Here's what we actually have. A logistics system held together by hope and a few very narrow waterways. Meet the choke points. The Suez Canal. The Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Malacca. The Panama Canal. Bab el-Mandeb. These aren't just shipping routes. They're the arteries of global trade. And they're all fragile. Terrifyingly fragile. Roughly 30% of global container traffic goes through the Suez Canal. One ship gets stuck, like the Ever Given in 2021, and $9 billion worth of trade gets frozen. Per day. The Strait of Hormuz? About 21 million barrels of oil pass through it every single day. One incident, one attack, one blockade, one miscalculation, and global energy markets go haywire. The Strait of Malacca handles roughly 25% of all traded goods. It's 600 miles long, and at its narrowest point, less than 2 miles wide. Let that sink in. A quarter of everything you buy passes through a waterway narrower than most rivers. Not exactly robust. And here's where it gets ugly. Because these choke points aren't just physical vulnerabilities. They're political ones. The Suez? Controlled by Egypt. Hormuz? Iran sits right next to it. Malacca? Bordered by Malaysia, Indonesia, and Singapore. The Panama Canal? Well, there's been some tension about who actually controls it lately. Verify. Every one of these choke points is a leverage point. A place where one country, or one militia, one pirate group, one desperate regime, can hold global trade hostage. And it's already happening. Houthi rebels in Yemen have been launching attacks on ships in the Red Sea. Shipping companies reroute around Africa. Costs go up. Transit times double. Insurance premiums spike. One regional conflict. One group with drones and missiles. And suddenly, the entire cost structure of global trade shifts. Here's the part nobody prepared for. There are no good alternatives. You can't just build a new Suez Canal. You can't relocate the Strait of Hormuz. These choke points exist because of geography. And geography doesn't negotiate. So what's the response? Companies are rerouting, stockpiling, paying higher insurance, building bigger inventories. All of it costs money. All of it gets passed to you. But here's the kicker. Even rerouting doesn't solve the problem, because every alternative route has its own risks. Go around Africa instead of through Suez? That adds 2 weeks and thousands of miles. Avoid Hormuz? Good luck finding another route that doesn't add massive costs. The global shipping system was optimized for speed and cost. It was not optimized for resilience. And now we're learning the difference. Think about it like this. Imagine your commute to work depends on one bridge. Just one. And that bridge is old, narrow, and occasionally someone parks a truck sideways on it. You can't build a second bridge. There's no space. You can't take a different route without adding an hour to your commute. So you just hope the bridge holds. That's global shipping, right now. Which raises an uncomfortable question. If the arteries of trade are this fragile, what happens when one of them actually breaks? Here's the old model. Find the country with the cheapest labor. Build your factory there. Repeat. Here's the new problem. Cheap labor is disappearing. For decades, globalization worked because there was always a cheaper workforce somewhere. Factory wages too high in Japan? Move to South Korea. South Korea getting expensive? Go to China. China's wages rising? Try Vietnam, Bangladesh, Indonesia. It was an endless game of labor arbitrage. And it worked because the world had young, growing populations desperate for jobs. That era is over. China's working-age population peaked in 2015. It's been shrinking ever since. By 2050, China will lose roughly 200 million people of working age, verified demographic projection. South Korea? One of the lowest birth rates on the planet. Japan? Already deep into demographic collapse. Europe? Aging faster than it can replace workers. Even the cheap labor destinations are aging out. Vietnam's birth rate is falling. Thailand's workforce is shrinking. Bangladesh will hit the same wall in a generation. Let that sink in. The entire premise of offshoring, abundant cheap labor, is evaporating. And you can't automate everything. Not yet, anyway. Here's where it gets messy. Because labor shortages don't just mean higher wages. They mean bottlenecks. Factories that can't scale. Orders that can't be filled. Supply chains that simply stop. And here's the kicker. Immigration isn't solving it. Because the countries that need workers the most are also the ones least willing to accept them. Japan wants workers but resists immigration. Europe wants workers but faces political backlash. The U.S. wants workers but can't agree on policy. Turns out, you can't have cheap labor, closed borders, and falling birth rates. Pick two. Maybe. So what's the alternative? Companies are trying everything. Higher wages, automation, robotics, poaching workers from competitors. But none of it fully compensates. Because the fundamental math has changed. There are fewer workers, more demand. And every factory, every supply chain, every service industry is competing for the same shrinking labor pool. And this isn't temporary. This isn't a recession you can wait out. This is structural. Demographics move slowly. Birth rates don't bounce back quickly. Once a population ages, it stays aged. The cheap labor model that powered globalization for 50 years? It's not coming back. Think about it like this. Imagine you run a restaurant. For years, you could always find cooks willing to work for minimum wage. Suddenly, there aren't enough cooks. Period. You can raise wages. You can buy better equipment. But if there simply aren't enough people, your kitchen doesn't scale. That's the global economy right now. And the consequences are everywhere. Factories relocate, but can't find workers. Wages rise, but productivity doesn't. Automation helps, but it's expensive and takes years to implement. Everything just gets harder and more expensive, which raises the question nobody wants to answer. If the cheap labor era is over, what powered globalization in the first place? Here's what made globalization smooth. One currency dominated everything. The dollar. One payment system connected everyone. SWIFT. One set of rules applied globally. Here's what's happening now. That system is fracturing. For decades, the dollar was the universal language of trade. It didn't matter if you were in Brazil, Bangladesh, or Belgium. If you wanted to buy oil, semiconductors, or anything substantial, you paid in dollars. And SWIFT, the messaging system that moves money between banks, was the global plumbing. Everyone used it. Everyone trusted it. Then came the sanctions. And suddenly, that trust evaporated. When the West froze Russia's central bank reserves and cut Russian banks from SWIFT, every other country on Earth watched and learned. The lesson? Your money isn't actually yours if it's in someone else's system. China saw it. India saw it. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Brazil, they all saw it. And they all started asking the same question: what stops the West from doing that to us? The answer? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. So now, everyone's building alternatives. China's pushing the yuan for trade settlements. The BRICS nations are talking about a shared currency. India and Russia are trading in rupees and rubles. Saudi Arabia is accepting yuan for oil sales. Even the European Union is trying to reduce dollar dependency. Let that sink in. The global monetary system, the thing that made cross-border trade easy, is splitting into rival payment networks. The global monetary system, the thing that made cross-border trade easy, is splitting into rival payment networks. And here's the kicker: fragmentation is expensive. When everyone used the dollar, you had one exchange rate to worry about, one clearing system, one set of regulations. It was simple. Now, you've got currency risk, bilateral payment agreements, multiple clearing systems. Every trade requires new infrastructure, new hedging, new costs. Congratulations. Money just got complicated again. Think about it like this. Imagine you're at a party. Everyone speaks the same language. Easy. Now imagine half the room switches to French, a quarter speaks Mandarin, and the rest are using hand signals. You can still communicate, but it's messy and slow and expensive. That's global finance right now. But here's where it gets really messy. Because fragmented payment systems don't just add costs. They enable blocs. If China and its partners trade in yuan, if Russia and India trade in rubles and rupees, if BRICS builds its own payment rail, suddenly, you've got parallel financial universes. And once those universes exist, they harden. Because switching between them requires trusted intermediaries. And trust is exactly what's breaking down. You end up with friendshoring for money. Trading with allies because it's easier, cheaper, and safer than trading with rivals. The problem? Your allies might not have what you need, but you trade with them anyway. Because the alternative is navigating a financial system where your payments could get frozen, your accounts locked, your reserves confiscated. And this creates a vicious cycle. The more fragmented the system, the more expensive trade becomes. The more expensive trade becomes, the more countries retreat into blocs. The more blocs form, the more fragmented the system gets. It's a doom loop, and we're in it. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Globalization didn't just require physical infrastructure, ships, ports, factories. It required financial infrastructure, a shared system where money could move freely, cheaply, and predictably. That system is breaking. So here's the question we've been avoiding this whole time. If you had to pick one, cheaper prices with higher geopolitical risk or higher prices with more security, what would you choose? Because that's the choice we're making. So here we are. Whether we admit it or not, globalization isn't ending with a bang. There's no dramatic collapse, no single moment where trade stops. It's dying slowly, through friction, through distrust, through 1,000 small decisions that all point in the same direction, away from integration and toward fragmentation. The security tax, the sanctions era, the subsidy arms race, supply chain duplication, choke point fragility, demographic collapse, money fragmentation. 7 reasons, 7 cracks in the system. And every single one makes the world a little more expensive, a little more rigid, a little less connected. Here's the thing nobody wants to say out loud. This is the new normal. We're not going back. The world that existed from 1990 to 2020, where trade expanded, borders softened, and efficiency ruled, that world is gone. It was built on trust, on cheap labor, on stable choke points, on a unified financial system. And every one of those foundations is crumbling. So what happens next? We trade less. We pay more. We duplicate everything. We fortify. We stockpile. We retreat into blocs. Democratic versus autocratic. West versus East. Ally versus rival. And the cost? It's already here. Higher prices. Slower growth. More volatility. Less cooperation. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Maybe that's the price we're willing to pay. Because globalization wasn't just about economics. It was about vulnerability. About depending on rivals, about trusting people you don't trust. And when the world gets unstable, when pandemics hit, when wars break out, when sanctions fly, efficiency stops mattering. Security matters. So we're making a choice, consciously or not. We're choosing resilience over efficiency, redundancy over optimization, control over cost. And maybe that's rational. Maybe it's necessary. But let's not pretend it's free. Every wall we build, every supply chain we duplicate, every sanction we impose, it's a tax. On growth, on prosperity, on the interconnected world we spent decades constructing. Globalization promised us a frictionless world, cheaper goods, infinite growth, borderless prosperity. It delivered for a while, but the bill is coming due, and we're all paying it. So if you made it this far, hit that subscribe button, because we're just getting started. Next time, we're diving into housing, how real estate became the silent monster eating entire economies. You won't want to miss it. See you then.